Now, the conclusion was that something has transferred from smooth bacterium to the rough bacterium, and because of that transfer, the rough bacterium was able to cause pneumonia and the mice died. Now, what was the Griffith's drawback or the problem in this experiment? Number one, Griffith could not explain the role of mice in this experiment. And second, what component of smooth bacteria is transferred to the rough bacteria that has caused virulence? What component means whether it was carbohydrate or protein or fat or DNA. What was transferred from smooth bacteria to the rough bacteria that caused virulence? This problem was overcome by three scientists: Avery, MacLeod and McCarty. The problem was transformed by Oswald Avery, Colin MacLeod and McCarty, and they thought the genetic material to be protein. Now, how did they concluded? Griffith, to overcome the drawback of Griffith's experiment, McAvery, McCarty and MacLeod, they took rough strain of bacterium in 4 test tubes, rough, rough strains of bacterium were taken. To the first test tube, they added carbohydrates of S bacterium. To the second, they added proteins of smooth bacterium. In the third, they added DNA of smooth bacterium, and in the fourth they added DNA of smooth bacteria plus enzyme. Which enzyme? Deoxyribonuclease. Which component actually act as genetic material? To prove that, MacLeod, McCarty and Avery, they took rough strain of bacterium in test tubes. पहले में उन्होंने क्या डाला? Carbohydrates of S bacterium. तो ये all the bacteria, they remained rough, they did not transformed into smooth. When the proteins were added, rough bacterium remained rough, they did not transform into smooth. But in a test tube where DNA from the smooth bacterium was added, so some of the rough bacterium, they transformed into smooth and they were able to cause pneumonia. To further check, along with DNA enzyme, deoxyribonuclease was added. This enzyme was able to digest DNA. So again, rough bacterium, they remained rough and they did not transform into the smooth. So this experiment by MacLeod, McCarty and Avery, it proves that DNA is the genetic material and not the carbohydrates, proteins or the enzyme. That's all. And can you think of the difference between DNA and DNase? DNA is deoxyribose nucleic acid and DNase is deoxyribonuclease. This is the enzyme and this is the nucleic acid. And this concludes that DNA is the hereditary material.